a little bit about me. My name's David, like Tony said. I'm really new to the Riverside area. I just moved here. My fiance is right there. She's doing her PhD at UCR. And so we moved here. And I am a front-end Dataviz engineer. I've been working in the industry for 2 years. I did an undergrad in computer science. And I'm really, really excited to have found all y'all in this community because I'm looking to make friends, especially people who are coding and creating. And so far, everyone that I've gotten a chance to meet has been amazing. And this talk in specific is aimed at kind of introducing the idea of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, mostly HTML and CSS, from the ground up. And so it's really good if you're starting out, but also if you're someone who has more experience with web development, I think this is maybe an opportunity for you to sort of rethink and sort of rediscover, re-uncover what web development is and how you relate to it and thinking about it from first principles. I hope everyone can get something out of it. But before I jump in, I kind of want to get a sense for where people are at in the room. So if you're someone who has little to no experience at all with web development, can you raise your hand? Perfect. Nice. This talk should be hopefully really accessible and great. Now, if you're someone who's learning web development, but feels like, well, I know the basic concepts, I've built some web pages, maybe raise your hand. Okay. So a lot of people, slightly more than last week. And then if you're someone who's like, wow, I've done a lot of web development, and I feel so confident I could even teach this if you're at that level.
Good job.
Okay, let's say you were.
That's not your one down.
Okay.
And I got my hand up.
Awesome. Cool. Okay, notch it one down. Someone who feels comfortable with web development.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Cool. Great. Perfect. So just to start off, I call this talk Unlocking HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. In part because sometimes I feel like coding can be hard and feel like it's locked away in a box. And like I hit a wall and I don't really know why I'm hitting it. That's super frustrating. And I want to give you guys the tools to feel more creative, more able to debug, and more able to deeply understand and feel competent when you're building in web development. But the truth is, I think it's less about unlocking things and a little bit more about the fact that the whole web development space is really cluttered. There's so many frameworks. People talk about Vue, React. They talk about different CSS properties and HTML tags and JavaScript languages and versions. And it's really overwhelming. I know I have been overwhelmed since trying to learn web development. Well, someone has messaged me on Slack. Maybe they should be here.
It was Tony.
Awesome. And so what I hope to, this talk should really be called is Uncovering HTML and CSS and a little bit of JavaScript, kind of what's really at the heart of it. And to do that, I want to divide this talk into 3 sections. So the first 2 sections will be a lot of me talking, unfortunately. And the second section will be, or I guess 0 and 1 will be me talking, 2 will be you guys coding along and building stuff with me. So the first section is this idea of what is the motivation behind building things in humans to start with. And then how does that flow into human history that brought us to web development, right where the web actually took off in the early 90s. And then from there, we're going to jump into actually inventing web development from first principles together using just like one file, like a text editor and a browser, and that's it. And I hope this will be illuminating and elucidating. And so I want you now to kind of open your minds and think for a second, what are your higher aspirations? What do you hope to do in life? What are some things that you really, really yearn to do before you die and leave this planet? I think one of those big things for most human beings is to build something beyond themselves, right? Basically, what that is creating a family or creating a company or community, like our community, or a great piece of art or a series of books that you want to learn. So I think at the heart of our core human motivations is this idea of building something bigger than ourselves. But to actually do that, we kind of need to break that down. Any system that does that, working with humans together, needs really 2 things. The first is a set of standard tools. So if you're an artist, you need paintbrushes. You need to understand your colors. If you're an artist, you also need a unifying style. So a sense of what matters to me. How do I do this? How do I tie it all together? So these are kind of abstract concepts. So one very kind of contrived, but very simple example would be, let's say we want to work together all together to build a house. We have this bigger vision of building a house. So we want to break that down to standard reusable components to create this house with. So we might say, okay, to build this house, we need to have a standard size for a door. And the door is going to be the same everywhere. And in that door, we're going to break it down into further pieces we're going to break it down to a doorknob, into the actual door itself, into the hinges that attach to the house. So what we're doing is we're breaking this big task into small little pieces that we can then sort of compose together into a door, into a window, and into the house as a whole. And to really make that house a home and meaningful, we're going to think about what style, how should it look, what colors, what era should it come from. And this is something I think that is unique across all of humanity. And this is also something that when we understand the concept of breaking down a bigger goal into smaller pieces and styling it well, we'll sort of have an intuition, even if you've never done web development, or HTML, or CSS, or JavaScript before, on how to do web development. So before we're able to relate this idea of building small pieces into something bigger than ourselves, I kind of want to step through human history, understand how web development as it was came to be. Because we always jump in and say, here's a P tag, here's this JavaScript. But they never really tell us, how did web development even start to begin with? So without further ado, this is a super accurate history lesson I'm about to give you guys. So first of all, you can think about humans in the caveman days. We had sensory inputs. We went into this world. We saw things like apples and saber-toothed tigers. We processed all the information into our brain. But unlike bees, which have like these hive mind or these central queens that sort of make decisions for everyone, we sort of live separate. I have this idea of an apple in my brain, but the person sitting next to me is thinking about a saber-toothed tiger that's trying not to get eaten by. And we're totally on different wavelengths. We can't work together and compose and build something bigger than ourselves because we're fundamentally separate. So the first technology that led eventually to web development was this idea of language. I could think of something in the real world and make some sounds with my mouth and my lips and produce an apple. Like, for example, say apple, and eventually we learn that signifies this thing in our real world. And suddenly, what's in our brains gets synced up. And from that, we were able to build song and storytelling and culture, things that stylize language, that make language meaningful to us. And through doing that, we can sort of combine words together. We can say, okay, there's an apple, there's a persimmon, this is a fruit. We have these higher order concepts. And I promise this will all come into web development. It's sort of a convoluted introduction, but I think it'll help web development make more sense. So we invented language, but the problem with language was that we had to be in the same spot at the same time, and you have to remember everything someone said. If we forgot it, it was gone. So eventually humans then invented writing, and this was really powerful because I could write my thoughts down through language and give it to tons of people, and I could also start to style it in consistent ways. I could use calligraphy, typography, color, layout, and develop this visual form of communicating. And you could use that to do a blueprint to build a house, for example, or to create an organized religion, a sacred text that could guide all of us working together. So this fundamental technology also stemmed a whole new branch of design and styling. We'll get that in a second. Basically, once we've kind of created this writing system, then we can do these higher order things that I mentioned, religion and science. But it also had some limitations, right? You need a physical copy of something, and what you write on a piece of paper is frozen. It doesn't get updated like the web does, like Facebook does. And so as we were doing this, we were also creating something new within writing, which is this idea of visual style. You can see, even from ancient writing, this is like some ancient biblical text, they started to develop a way to present information. And that information really relied on boxes and grids and composing smaller elements into big things. So in this case, you can see that we have just this bigger book cover with a smaller section of writing, and within that, subsections and subsections kind of composed with boxes into a bigger piece. Kind of like you compose a bigger house. And this is important because if we think about this, when we come to web dev in a few minutes, we'll see how all these concepts developed in written writing inform sort of the weird particularities of web development in HTML. So you can see many examples of this. This is a text found in India. Again, they're sort of breaking this bigger layout into smaller individual pieces that and we'll see that a lot when we get into the coding. Another thing that really accelerated this notion of boxes and breaking things down was this idea of movable type, basically the printing press. And you can see here someone is arranging, in modern day, basically a typeset to be done. And everything's backwards, so it's going to be slammed with ink onto a piece of paper. But you can already really see how boxy it is, how each of the letters and the words are boxes themselves, and the sections can be broken into boxes. And so we have this amazing evolution from language to written text, thinking about visual layout. And then if you come all the way forward to the 1990s, we have computers. But in many ways, they haven't really caught up to where writing even was at that moment. because you look at this picture, you can see what I imagine is the inventor of the internet. So Tim Berners-Lee was really the architect behind the internet. And he was sitting there thinking about, wow, I would love to connect scientific principles to each other. So one concept leans on the other, and we kind of build this understanding of science that's bigger than any one person. But the reality was he was sitting in Switzerland, that's Switzerland right there, and he had one computer which had one scientific document, but there were all these other documents hidden on computers, and there was no really standardized way for them to talk. He basically identified 3 problems that we've been touching on this whole time. So the first is that there's no human bigger than one person knowledge base. And the sub-problems within that was that there's no standard way to structure documents that we want to share across computers. There's also no standard way to just style and display those documents. So this is Tim Berners-Lee, the architect behind the internet in the 1990s, and he's sad because these things are missing. But that's sort of where we come in, and we want to think, well, what would we invent at this moment to solve this problem, to unify human knowledge across computers? And the answer to that is that we need to invent web development. So this closes the portion of the talk where I talk at you, and now we're going to start to actually make it more interactive and code together. So for this next section, we're going to take this fundamental problem that we described here and build up web development from scratch. So to do that, I want to first of all clarify with this section what we're about to do is not. It's not going to be an accurate, detailed description of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. It's not even going to be a thorough history of web development or how web development fully works. And it's not even going to be a guide for writing good, clean code. But what I hope that this section, what this will be, is an attempt to kind of strip away all of these details of web development that you sort of learn as you're learning it, and really think about the models and evolution of web development. And then with that simplification, synthesize maybe things that you've learned if you've been studying before, or synthesize new concepts that we'll learn today. And the last thing I want to say is there's some ground rules to make sure that we can all have fun. First of all, if you're new to web development, in this section, feel free to ask lots of questions and just try to break things. Like if something's working, try and break it. Try and experiment. And if you're more experienced, you kind of already know a lot about web development. Maybe refrain from pulling all of your outside knowledge into the session. Just keep that in your mind. And second, if you see someone else trying to struggling to learn a concept, rather than telling them the answer, maybe just kind of give them a nudge in the right direction. And so for this next step, it looks like everyone's got a laptop out. What I'd like everyone to do is, first of all, pair up into groups of 2. So we'll do like pair programming. So hopefully one of you has a laptop. So maybe you can look, if you guys are already kind of in tables of 2, maybe turn to the person next to you and say hi and introduce yourself. Tell them your name.
Tony. Nice to meet you, Tony.
So are you use web development?
And the next thing is decide who wants to use the laptop. So choose one person to be driving the laptop.
Yeah, one of the guys who speaks English. So. Yeah. What about you? What do you do?
So I'm doing web development for like about a year and a half. So chef quite a job. And I just
I'm curious to see what it's all about.
Yeah.
Okay. So then the next step is whoever is driving the laptop, I want you to open ideally the simplest text editor you can. So for me,
Would you be
I'm
fine?
going to
Mine's long.
I'm just going to pull up Sublime Text. So if you have Sublime Text installed on your machine, could you just open that?
As long as it's right. What is it? Just
if you don't have Sublime Text, if you have another favorite text editor, ideally one that's geared towards coding, that'd be better. Raise your hand if you do not have Sublime Text on your computer. Okay, a lot of people. Raise your hand if you have some other code editor that you used before for coding. Okay. Yes. Raise your hand if you have none of those things, not Sublime and not some other code editor. Okay, amazing. That's what I should have asked first. So then just open whatever code editor. I'm going to be using Sublime. And the first thing, so once you've done that, it should be good. The last thing I want to know before we jump into this live coding interactive is that for those of you who've done web development before, we're not going to use any libraries, tools, or frameworks. We're not going to use any established HTML elements. So we're not going to use p tags, a tags, divs, h1, spans, or anything like that. We're not even going to use classes or IDs. All we need, like I said, is a single text file, Chrome browser. I'm using Sublime Text, and then we're going to use a few CSS attributes, which I'll explain to you if you're not fine with that. So let's to start with, I'm going to kind of quickly just go up a slide and visit. So I want to revisit our original problem, is that there was no unified human knowledge base. The first thing that Tim Berners-Lee had to do to invent web development was say, I need some way for computers to talk to each other. And that way was, the simplest form was he said basically just a house has an address. I'm going to give every computer in the world a unique address. And so if I want some document from it, I'll just go to that address. And so the first thing, before we dive into coding fully, is that I've actually taken the address of my computer and I put on it the starting text that we'll use as we do this interactive web tutorial. So I'm hoping everyone is connected to the internet. I'm guessing, raise your hand if you're not connected to the internet. Get one person? Okay. If there's a way to connect quickly, even just through your phone, because we won't be downloading much data, that'd be amazing. So what you can do is you can take this number here and open your web browser. Go to that web address. It should.
Do you need a charger? Do you know if this one will work for you?
It's one of the service bus. It's like a.
I don't know if it will reach.
Might be a bit far. When it starts getting.
Just because we got
Which network are you on?
the network I'm on is.
That's why. Yeah, you share secure.
Oh, I see. So I guess we all need to be on the same. Is everyone on UCR guest?
I'm on.
Yeah, they may be watching.
Okay. So I should have had it beforehand. My bad. So in that case, let's just do a quick little. Let's just do. You guys, I'm guessing everyone is part of the Slack group. Okay. So what was supposed to happen in this moment was I was basically going to show you this idea of here's my computer's unique address like a house. You guys could go to that address, and because we're all on the same network, I would serve you a basic document, and from that document you could start. But because of I didn't test this beforehand, there's some limitations to that. But you can imagine that it worked. And what I will do is I'm going to copy and paste all this text into our Slack group, and hopefully everyone is a part of that. So actually, where should I post it? It's general, maybe.
Maybe in a code.
Okay. Post it. Say active starting. And then I will just make a comment. Okay. There's a massive piece of text that will start. So raise your hand if you have not gotten the text yet. Okay. Maybe you guys y'all are not on Slack. Nice. Okay. Let me. Sorry. Raise your hand again if you're not. Didn't get the text. Okay. 3 people. Let's see. What's the more public way I can do this?
Pastebin.
Was that?
Pastebin.
Oh, how do you do that?
You go to Pastebin, you text, and then you distribute the URL to everyone.
Yeah. Pastebin.com?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything, maybe. Okay. So do paste like that, and then what now?
You share URL buttons.
Yeah, that's
Or like some publish button. Complete the paste, whatever, create new paste.
Okay.
There should be like a share button, and you take that URL. Should be like a short.
So
On my glasses.
Did you create a new thread or did you post it in an existing thread?
I created a new thread on code.
It's on code, it's his message, and then when you click the thread, it's the first message.
Gotcha.
Oh, interactive.
Oh, you got it.
Talk.
There we go.
I'm surprised you were able to see
So
that. That's
it's
pretty
the
funny.
reply, not the message.
Yeah.
Going into it.
It's not gonna work on the phone, gotta give it
Okay, great. So
up.
then
I'll give it
the paste bin URL is
I'm not sure which.
Okay, so this is the paste bin URL.
It's Casey's. Yeah. It works.
Got it.
Okay. So now, perfect.
It's case sensitive, yeah.
Raise your hand if you have still not been able to get the
I
paste
need to
bin.
name that as an HTML file, right?
Yes. Wow, you're already ahead of the game. I love it. Exactly. So the next thing I'm going to do is I just open Sublime Text, and I'm just going to create a new file, and then copy and paste all of this into it. So I open a new blank text file. There's nothing special about this file. I can copy and paste all of my text. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit save. I'm going to save it just as a file. I'm going to call it index.html. And the only thing that really matters in this title is that it ends with .html, which signals that it's going to be a file we're going to use direct HTML in. And I'm going to save that to my desktop. Fast. And you guys can see that I've got my desktop just that one file, all of 5 months. Okay. So if you look at the text, it says it's got a title, How to Invent the Web in 7 Easy Steps, and it's got steps 1 through 7 in it. And the first step was basically this idea that computers need to communicate with each other, which is the step that failed. And the next step is the step that we're currently on. So the next need that the creators of the internet realized was basically, at its simplest, the web needs to transfer language for plain text. And so what they invented was this idea of creating a file that ends in .html and writing some words. And that's the simplest as it is. That's a file you can transfer from one computer to the next. And so that's what I've done. I've opened a file, I've called it .html. I've saved it to my desktop, and now what I can do is I can just go ahead and on my tiny mouse and click that file, double click it, and it will open up in my preferred browser, which in this case is Chrome. And as you can see, I successfully transferred it from that file onto a web browser. This is a really momentous moment. Taking something that's in a file by itself, and theoretically, you could transfer this across the web to someone else's computer. But it's also kind of an ugly moment, because look at this. So the next need that the creators of the internet realized was that once they transferred language, their third need was some way to mark up or tag groups of words in order to style them in a specific way. So in this case, we just don't want it to all be one giant blur. That's kind of we want it to look different and sort of be broken up different lines. And the way that they did that was they were saying, okay, well, we have this fundamental need to group sections of this text to style it differently. And as we remember from the olden days, they had sort of this beautiful way of breaking layouts into really tiny boxes. And so what we want to do is create some way that the same way a teacher would take your essay and say, oh, let me circle this word, can you bold that word? Or let me circle this word, can you italicize it? Or let me group these words, can you like move it to its own paragraph? We want some way to circle or select text in our document. And so what they settled on was a way of marking up a language to let you mark up text. So what they ended up on, basically they decided that they created this anatomy of an HTML tag. And it's simply a way to group words between two tags. And you can, basically when you see this letter P, you can put absolutely any word. So let me just give you a little demo to kind of show you what I'm talking about. So I've got this big file here. And I have this need to mark up or tag things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to I'm going to, first of all, just cut this third thing here. And then I'm going to say, I'm going to create a tag. I'm just going to call it my fun little tag. Because that's a great name for an HTML tag. And then I'm going to copy and paste my content inside it. I'm going to save that, and I'm not going to put this React. I'm going to go back to my browser, and I'm going to go to my website. I'm going to hit Command-Shift-R, which is going to refresh the page. And it's going to refresh, but it's going to look exactly the same. Because while I've grouped this text, I haven't actually styled or changed it in any way. So this first need in web development was to be able to style different parts of this link, this text you transferred. And so the way to develop doing that is just literally write style equals, open parentheses, and you write what style you want. So in this case, I want the color to be red. Color red. I'm going to save this file. Then we go back to the web page and refresh it. I'm going to reopen the file. And boom! Now the web is beautiful! I've created red text on white background, which is the most amazing design choice in the world. So I want you to take a moment, raise your hand if you have successfully created, I want you to take a moment on your phone to put a tag around this third section and make it some color that's a little bit more suitable than red. So I'll give you guys a quick second to do that. Or actually, raise your hand if you've already done the equivalent of what I've done here. Okay. Amazing. So let's just, I'm going to give you guys about 2 minutes to break out and do the equivalent, but choose a much better color for yours on your computer.
Just because, why not?
I think if you try to cover two sides, a little bit, but if you're just doing the one, just HTML. It's like I'm still gonna do it, but not like there we go. Still oh, I see. It needs this thing.
Let me give you like 10 seconds to wrap up.
Close tag on dot type.
So you guys can keep whispering if you want. I'm gonna move forward. So we're gonna stay on point number 3. This is really awesome. Like I can now group parts of text, and then I can like give them styles. So one style. So we're only gonna talk about a few different ways of styling HTML elements, just ones that are useful, essential for this time. But what I'm gonna also introduce this idea. You can say display block, and just like if you look at our these ancient writings, how they would kind of group things into little section blocks and sections, we kind of want to be able to make our third point its own section. So display block is one way we do that by styling elements. So I can refresh the page, and I can see now that my third point is now on its own line. And then one little detail that I want to kind of just say as we're doing this is each time you add a new style, you want to put a semicolon between each thing. So I've done this, and I'm like, this is awesome. Something else I could do, I could play with, I could say font size. I can make the font size like 44 pixels. Refresh it, and you can see it's gotten much, much bigger. And I'm like, I love this style. It's red, it's huge, it's bold. I want to be able to do this with each point, and for all 7 points of learning to do web dev. So what I can do here is basically go ahead and say, okay, let me take this code. I'm going to copy and paste this. I'm going to go up to the second point. I'm going to hit enter. I'm going to put this here. I'm going to go down here. I'm gonna close my tag like that, and I look, and I'm like, oh, amazing! Now I have points 2 and 3 like this. I'm gonna go up to point number 1, and we go to point number 1, which I can then do the same tag to. I'm gonna close my tag, refresh it, look at the page. This is great. It's kind of getting hard to tell them apart now, which we can deal with later. As you can see, I'm able to apply this styling to multiple sections of it. And let's say that I can also go and do a separate tag for this top thing. I can say, okay, here's my top text. I'm going to call this like my top title, like that, and then put my text here. And I can style this thing. I can say style equals, I don't know, color blue. Refresh the page, and I scroll a little bit. Top of the page, and see my blue text. I'm feeling really good. But one thing that I'm learning and I'm realizing as I'm doing this with you guys here live is that I'm basically copying and pasting a ton of code and a ton of style. I'm basically saying, okay, my fun little tag, let me put the style for that. Okay, I want the same style down here. And just because I'm kind of trying to create a consistent style, I'm just doing things over and over and over again. So that brings us to our 4th point down here, which is a need. Styling individual tags leads to a lot of repeated code and writing things over and over again. And this is stupid. So my need is to not be stupid. And the invention I create for that is basically naming tags consistently, which I've kind of already done. And then basically having somebody to apply a standard styling to all tags and only write that styling in one spot. This is also another way I create sort of an abstraction or a reusable component. I can reuse it over and over again. So the creators of the internet were like, great, well, we have this great thing going with tags. So this is actually the only standard tag I'm going to show you today. Basically, they said, we want to style things consistently. We're going to create a style tag. And in between that style tag, we're going to put the name of the component that you want to style. For example, let's say I want to style my fun little tag. And here I can apply any styling I want, and it'll apply to every single one. And I only have to do it in one spot. So I can say, for example, what I really want is font, the font size. Oh, let me say font style to be italic. And you can look, and suddenly I've styled everything on the entire page from one spot, greatly reducing this. And what I can do now is, now that I've got this going on, I can come here to my style tags and basically just delete them. I'm just going to select it everywhere. This is a little shortcut I have in my web editor. Delete it, like that. Save it. And you can see I've removed the style, and now it looks really ugly again. And I will go back and move the style up to the top of the document, like this. And I basically, now when I save this and refresh the page, I've applied that style to every single thing with that tag name. And so if you remember early on, we were talking about building a house. And in a house, you need to have like a standard size of a nail, a standard door, a standard window, for everyone to work together, and a standard styling for the house to be able to build a house that's consistent and fits together. As you can see here in the code, we're starting to do that a little bit. We're starting to say, okay, we're going to style all of these little pieces of code the same way. And all I need to do is write this one tag name, and it'll inherit all this great style. Cool. So, but as we're doing this, I'm going to scroll on to the next point. We've sort of gotten rid of repeated code. So I'm going to. But our next need is basically, if you think about these print layouts that we saw earlier, in order to build these really complex layouts, they didn't actually just list a whole bunch of elements in a row. Basically, if you see my text and my HTML, it's just all tags, kind of one tag, next tag, next tag, next tag. But actually what they did is they created this really cool complex nested structure where they had, basically you can see they had like a smaller element inside of this bigger section. and this section inside of this larger section here, and this section inside of the larger element. So just like kind of like you'd build, a window inside of a window frame, inside of a wall, inside of a house. To compose real good layouts that could create this World Wide Web, we need to have a really, really strong sense of being able to compose things and build things and add them together. And so to get practical with that, I'm going to jump back to my document here. And I'm going to take a look at these tags here. And I basically have an idea. And my idea is this. I got my title here at the top of the page. How to invent web dev in 7 steps. And these ones, because they're a list, I want to indent them slightly. I want to basically scoot them all over to the right a little bit. This I could accomplish by basically saying, okay, let me just scoot each of the individual tags over a little bit to the left. So I could do that by basically saying margin on the left, I'm going to give it 50 pixels or 30 pixels. Clear, I refresh the page, and you can see I got this nice indent going. And so I'm like, great, I don't need to, I can just, this layout is working great. But then let's say something happens here. And I add a little bit, let's say I add like a little bit more text. I say something like, by small text. And in the middle, I want to make some comment about my code. I want to add something. I want to say like, this is really fun. And if I refresh this page, I should be able to scroll down and see this. But I'm realizing something. Even though it's technically in this section where I'm listing all these things, it's not indented because I basically only indented certain tags. What I really want is to create one giant section that encapsulates all, both the small tiny text and my fun little tags. So what I can do is go back to my document and what I can do is basically take, I'm going to make my solution a little bit clearer. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make something called, I'm going to create a new tag. This tag is going to be called my container tag. And what I want to use is to basically to use it just like the layouts we saw on like the ancient books as like a box that kind of groups the section together. And that way when I can apply style to the whole thing. So I'm going to take this little section.
In the style section?
Sorry, the style section is above. I'm still in the lower section, just the HTML tag. And I'm going to wrap my entire, this entire lower document here in this container tag. I'm going to actually just move the title out if it's not part of the section. And then I'm going to just indent this visually so you can see what's going on here. Basically, I've created this container tag that contains all this stuff down here. And then what I can do is go up to my style tag and say, my container tag. And I can say, I want to make it, for example, I'm going to apply a style and say, okay, let's do a margin left of 60 or 60 pixels. Margin now, and when I refresh, what we'll see is I can style this container tag. I go here. What I want to happen is to be able to style everything down here at the same time. So there seems to be some sort of bug in my code. Good question. Does this make sense so far? Are people able to create a container tag with your other tags inside of it? On the other hand, if you created a container tag. Okay, cool. Yeah, right. There are lots of different. That's like the principal outermost tag. Yeah, totally, exactly. So.
Maybe it needs to be.
Oh, there's yeah.
Maybe I don't know why it might need to be a block.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
I did include
See.
it. Okay, style.
But play block in the
I don't know
lesson.
what it is.
Exactly. Boom. This actually happened when I was practicing it. Out. Perfect. Okay. Thank you. So basically, yeah. Go ahead.
Can you increase the font size of Sublime?
Yeah, certainly.
Thank you.
But yeah, it's basically a square. Or in this case, this is turning the whole document into one square and each little is another little square.
See what
It's like you see it. It's like smoke.
nothing else.
Inside, that's all.
The box still
That's why you lose.
What's strange about
Okay.
I got as far
So
as my like glorious pink and
awesome. So raise your hand if you're feeling more on the comfortable side with this information. It mostly makes sense to me.
this is the
Raise your hand if you're getting some of it, but there's still some things that are kind of unclear. Oh yeah.
Is the reason that it's actually adding a line break after each section because of using the display block?
Yes. Exactly. So the question is, why is it putting each new element on its own line? It's because I use the display block properties on it. And so if I take that out,
Well, you can just scroll down and see what happens when it's not there because 4, 5, and 6 are not in a block.
exactly. Yep. Perfect. So, so what we've done basically is we started to create on the web with our like HTML markup language what people have been doing for centuries, even millennia, in terms of creating written text documents, breaking things up into smaller sections. Now, one thing that I want to do is kind of get a little bit more into how do we style things now that they're in sections, and how do styles apply across groupings. And to do that, we are on point number 6. So basically, now that we have HTML inception, which is that we've got like a my container tag, and inside of that we've got like my little element tags. When we style this my container tag, how is it going to affect the things below? This is kind of an important question to answer because we really want to have consistent style across things, and we also want to know what's going to happen. So I can just try this. I can play with this. So if we look at my webpage as it currently stands, I've got this my container tag, and it wraps all of these things down here. I'm going to make this font size a little bit smaller because it's actually super hard to see. So if I look here, you can see that my container tag basically wraps around this whole section. I can actually highlight just this section, my container. You can see this whole section of them. They've indented, I put a margin on the left. The question is, if I style my container, what will happen to the elements below it? And so if I go in here and say, well, I already know that I've made this text red here. What happens if I go to an element that's wrapping the parent element above it and change the text color? And I want you guys just to sort of guess, turn to your partner and guess. If I write here, color, let's say fuchsia, what's going to happen to the my little fun tag? Is it going to turn, or let me choose a much more different color. Say color green. Thank you. If I make this outer thing be green, what will happen to the inside things? Will they stay red? Will they become green too? So turn to the person next to you and in 10 seconds, tell them your guess.
I think it'll say red. I think it's the owl. Yeah, something. And style that has high spread. So you place the style in the tag. Oh. It's the high spread.
Okay, and now for the answer we've all been waiting for. So I'm styling the container green, but there are tags inside that are red. So the question is, what's going to happen? I'm going to refresh the page, and what you'll see is something really interesting. So the smaller tag, so my little tag here, stayed red, but the text that this text right here, this is really fun, turned green, and my plain text also turned green. And so, in trying to make sense of this, we can kind of think about it like a waterfall. Like you have this parent tag, like my container tag, and it says, hey everybody, here's a new idea, everyone's going to be green. And then it sort of cascades or drops that style down to every element below it. And all those elements are just like willing recipients. They're like, oh, amazing, like, we're going to be green now, I love it, I'm green. You can see that, but this is really fun, it just turned green. But there are some tags that have their own ideas. For example, my fun little tag here, it says, no, I know I'm already going to be red. And so when you cascade that color change down to it, it's actually going to say, no, I have my own color, and I'm going to cascade that down to every children below me. I'm going to stop that. So a good image for thinking about this is actually a cascade or a waterfall. And if you look here, you kind of think of a website like a waterfall. And at the top, you can think of like A, for example, could be my container component. And it's cascading, kind of like water would cascade down a waterfall. It's cascading style down to everything that's inside it or everything that's below it, and affecting its style. But if, for example, part B says, I have my own defined style, it's going to override that style itself. So next is, I want you to do even more HTML sections. So what I want you to do is to take one of your inner tags and make a tag within that. So for example, in this case, let's say I want to make the word invention be really huge. So I'm going to make a tag called like huge, close tag, and call it like that, and then I can style it. So I want to give you guys 10 seconds for someone to make a tag inside a tag inside a tag. So you have your container tag, the next tag, and then the next tag. So I'll give you guys like 30 seconds to do that with your partner.
Okay. Yeah. I'm just taking this.
Yeah.
No, that's not what I mean. There. This and put it inside the top. My next tab is called knock. Perfect. All right. And it should be. I don't know why. I was saying container tag and P. That way I see that. Now it's going to wait.
Oh, I did.
There you go. Yeah, so it forces it to be the closest to the as a color. It ignores the red one because it's further away. There's so I put another one, non-container, called yellow.
There's only animals that are doing
I'm surprised the background color doesn't apply to maybe there's a predefined style. Oh, there's a style. Oh, yeah. So if I change the style.
Okay, so we're a little over time. I'm gonna pull us back together as we wrap up. But this idea of applying a style at a high level, having it cascade down to all the elements below it, is where you get the idea. Like cascade CSS or cascading style or cascading style sheet. So as we wrap up here, I want us to remember what we're doing this right now. We're inventing web development, and so we created basically these tags that we've made up, and we've given them properties. That way we can reuse them up here in this style area. And down here, we're able to basically repeat that style and create these reusable elements, much like someone building a house would create a reusable set of pieces. But the last thing I kind of want to do is to think about all of us in this room. Each of you has a laptop, right? And you're like coding up and naming your own crazy tags. Like, what are some tag names that people have created that are crazy? Has anyone made like unusual tag names right now? I feel like I heard some over here.
Super creative now for that.
I did hot pink instead of red. That was like my
Oh, nice.
No, what was that color we used? No.
Oh, we had chartreuse at
There we
first,
go.
but it didn't come up with like.
Chartreuse. Wow. Amazing. Well, so you can imagine that you guys could be listening to this tutorial and writing your own tag name. So I called mine fun little tag, but you guys could have also been like, okay, I don't really like that name. I'm going to call mine like,
I like them.
well,
Creating an identifier.
exactly.
And when you set the tag, you're specifying characteristics. So wherever you everything goes to character. And those other tags that you enclose, it's going to draw off character.
So I'm hearing some amazing thoughts over here. Right? This idea that a tag name is just an identifier. And once I've created that identifier, my fun little tag, Wallace, my name, purple, whatever it is that I want to call that identifier, I can then use that identifier to specify style up here. Just like it wouldn't matter if I called like a door, or like a hat, as long as that's consistent, and we knew what that thing was, we have a name for it. But one thing I want to think about is basically the web was about connecting everyone in the world and creating shared documents. And if we're all like writing these random like tags and names, it gets pretty confusing pretty fast. And so what happened as the web evolved is they said, we need some standardized thing. Just like people building houses have standardized tools and names, we need some standardized elements that we can use. And then rather than having to write new style, we're going to give them default style. So if you use this particular tag name, it'll just get style automatically. Like for example, maybe there's a red tag, and if you say red, it gets colored red. And so many of you, raise your hand if you've learned any web dev before. Amazing. So many of you, what are some tags that you learned in web development? Yeah, exactly. Great. So one thing I could do here is, with this thing, I could have named it, instead of my fundamental tag, I could call it P. And say that, basically I rename it to P everywhere. And then if I go over here, you'll see that it's got some default styling applied to it. Or I could, instead of naming all of them with the P tag, I can name them with like an H1 tag. And that would make all the text really big, like a heading. So when you first dive into web development, you sort of learn all these arbitrary names. These are just conventions that people developed as they invented web development. And so if you guys had been there in the 90s inventing web development, you could have named your own tag, whatever you wanted, and eventually created that convention to bring us to web development, where it is today. So what we want to do really quickly is try using some of these default tags. So for example, one of the conventions, one popular tag that people use is called a div tag. You guys can try that. So you can just rename one of yours div, D-I-V. And this tag in particular, I can, for example, do it here, is a tag that's meant to basically create a unique block. Yeah, go ahead.
So what's the difference between using your own tag, like making up your own tag name, versus using like a div tag and then name equals or ID equals? What's the pro and con of those two methods?
Yeah, great question. So what are the pros and cons of using an established tag like div versus just naming yours from scratch? And the real only advantage are two things. Number one, people will recognize div. They're like, oh, I've used a div before. I know what it does. So it's easier to read, it's easier to share, it's easier to collaborate. The second is, because it's a recognized tab, browsers actually support it. So if I go in here and I say down here, I make a div tag and I say this is a div, and I save it, and I refresh this page and scroll down to it, right here, and I select it. This goes into your browser tuning a little bit. So basically, what I can see is that the browser has actually said, oh wow, I recognize this tag, and I'm going to apply some default styling to it. So if I select this tag in my browser, you'll actually scroll down, you'll see, oh look, there's actually a default styling which says display block for the div. And for example, if I did the same thing but I called this an H1, then refresh that, and then scroll down, looked at this section, which is now thanks.
Oh yeah, that's
One. And I select this in my browser. You can see that the browser has actually applied all of this default styling just for free. So, for example, it basically said like the font size should be this. It should have this much margin above and below it. It should be bold, and it should be displayed as a block. And so these are basically the conventions that have been developed over a long time. But in the old days of web dev, there were no established things. You had to write all the style yourself.
In the old days of web dev, you didn't get stuff.
Oh, really? Wow.
That was before CSS.
That's true. That's a good point. I didn't think about that. Yeah.
That was for tables.
And all these different elements.
Are those styles the same across browsers? Like if I go to Firefox or Chrome, are those exactly the same values, or does it have slight variations?
I know that in general they should be identical. Someone who's an expert may
They're the same. That's what the standards, or that's what the web standards that the browsers follow.
Mm-hmm.
So if the browser is following the standards, then they should all be the same.
Okay.
The only time you'll see a difference is if somebody is creating a browser that's not adhering to standards, or if some change in the standards arises and the browser you're using does not update to conform to the new standards.
When you say standards, are you referring to like the W3 standards?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Basically, it's the body that says this is what it means when you do this with this language. So yeah, I believe it's W3 for HTML, CSS. And
well, not specifically, because not all the browsers stick to the standard. If you, for example, are starting developing a website, just do what we have done here. Probably some of the features, like the font face or the paddings that have as default, will be slightly different. There are some tools that have been developed on top as another development strategy. One of them is called Normalized CSS, which helps you set the default for all of the browsers so you can have a better development.
Amazing, yeah, super helpful. Cool. So so this has been sort of an introduction to what it must have felt like to sort of invent the web. And we're seeing all these questions like, what if you do this? Why would you name it this thing versus this thing? What should I name my tags? Is it the same across all browsers? And these are sort of things that happen. Like browsers had different default stylings. In fact, the original architects thought that browsers should just decide what things look like. And now it's more standardized. But it's important. I guess what I hope to impart was the fact that all these standards now were invented. And as you go on and invent the web and build web applications, being able to know that will help you build new things and understand things with a lot more clarity. And so the last thing I want to do, just to wrap up, is kind of revisit where we started and sort of think through all of those things again. So basically what we started was this idea of humans wanting to build something bigger than ourselves, which I think is why we're all here doing software development. And then from there, this idea that to do that, we sort of need to break things down into smaller pieces, which we did with HTML elements and style them consistently. And I think what I hope that you'll take away as you look forward and kind of return back to HTML, CSS, JavaScript that you're learning. You didn't actually touch on JavaScript. But you'll keep in mind that all of these things, as much as they get messy and as much as they're like complicated errors, they're all trying to solve a fundamental problem, which is that humans want to collaborate and share knowledge together. And they want to do that by building small pieces that can add up to something bigger like a house or a web page. And they also want to style them consistently. And so I just sort of return to this mess and look forward to modern frameworks. These are all just attempts to solve that better. And so I know that many of you are starting your journey, many of you are along your journey, but I just think that what's really exciting about being in where we are today is that we can understand these principles and, yes, go on and learn existing frameworks. We can learn about CSS, HTML, we can learn about Angular, we can learn Vue, we can learn React. We can also be the creators of the next frameworks. And to really do that well, we want to understand how did web get to where we are and where do we want it to go to next. And that, where web goes next, is up to all of us. So thank you so much.
All right, guys. Now that the presentation's over, make sure you guys network. There's still some pizza over there if you guys want some, and some soda. You guys.
What's up?